I'm Father Benedict Groeschel, and I am here today to give you the opportunity to meet a great Catholic philosopher. Some of you know her. We have a very, very interesting topic, and I'm going to just be the interviewer in this series of 13 talks on, well, I'll let her tell you. My guest today is Dr. Alice von Hildebrand, a very well-known Catholic writer, philosopher, and a great friend of mine. If you've been watching our series, which I hope you have, we left off discussing femininity and feminism. And I have in the past said I am very sympathetic to many of the goals of feminism. Dr. von Hildebrand is making a distinction now because she realizes that the word feminism has at times taken on some negative connotations and has not been helpful. So she likes femininity. And there's the famous saying that there's nobody less feminine than a feminist. So Dr. von Hildebrand, let's pick up where we left off, clarifying femininity versus feminism.
You know, Father, if I want to put it in very plain language, I see feminism in my terminology as a revolt against the very structure of the female body and the very structure of the female soul. You know, in some way, feminists would like to be like men while hating men. It's a sort of very paradoxical situation, whereas I see femininity as a profound understanding of the beauty that God has put in the woman when he created her. And I'm going to defend a thesis which is going to recur through all the shows that we're going to make, that truly to understand the incredible beauty of femininity, we're going to need the New Testament. Because the very moment that we have Mary, you know, there's sort of signs of it in the Old Testament. I mean, for example, if you take Esther, if you take some great female personalities, but in Mary, you have an image of the beauty of femininity which is so overwhelming that once a woman understands it, she goes on her knees and thanks God that she has a structure which is similar to the one of the Holy Virgin. Father, you know, I cannot meditate enough on the words of the Holy Virgin. She is offered to become the mother of the Savior, the greatest overwhelming privilege that you can imagine. And as she's vowed her virginity to God, she says, "How can this be? I know not man." She says exactly what she says, "I know not man," which means I'm a virgin. Today we say, "Oh, I haven't had sex." You know, it is so coarse and so vulgar, the whole mystery is already scratched. And then she's guaranteed that she will be covered by the Holy Spirit. And then she says these sublime words that should be repeated every day by every single Roman Catholic and Orthodox. "I am the handmaid of the Lord." It is said in the liturgy, to serve God is to reign. Now, Father, I've studied philosophy for many years. And whether you take Greek philosophy or you take traditional philosophy, you say the highest is God. Then comes a radical cut, creator, creatures. Then you have a whole hierarchy. You have angels, you have human beings, higher animals, lower animals, and so on and so on. Now, do you realize that through the incarnation, a metaphysical tsunami has taken place.
A tsunami meaning a tidal wave.
A tidal wave. And what is it? That a young Jewish girl who accepts to become the mother of Christ, who declares herself to be the handmaid of the Lord, becomes the queen of the angels. Now, in other words, a being that has a body is placed above angels. Now, when you realize that this is something that is so overwhelming, it's an absolute revolution in metaphysics, because for all of us, the body is lower than what is spiritual. But because she said yes to God. And you know, there's another thing that I'd like to say about women. You know, this is something that my knowledge of biology is very limited. And I certainly was no longer that young when I knew about the biological makeup of the female body. And I found out to my joy and amazement that the intimate organs are veiled, which is not the case with the man. Now, Father, tell me something about the veil in the Old Testament.
Well, it was before the Holy of Holies.
Yes.
It was what took the eyes of people away. It was a symbol of transcendence, of the immaterial, of the mysterious.
The sacred.
The sacred, yes.
What about Moses when he came down from Mount Sinai?
Yes, he had to veil
he
his
veiled
face.
his face because he had spoken to God. So if you read about various traditions, you see again and again the veil indicates sacredness. And once you see sacredness, you imply that there's a relationship with God. Now, Father, I've given hundreds of talks about purity based on my husband's book, you know, Purity and Virginity. And when I hint at the fact that the female body has a note of sacredness, it simply means this belongs to God. And if it belongs to God, what it calls for is modesty.
It's interesting, Doctor, that down in the depths of the human soul, no matter what a culture or anti-culture does, particularly with a larger number of people, you will get an affirmation of truth, of value, that maybe they never even learned. Now, here's an interesting story for our audience that's pertinent to this. I was annoyed to find out that Mother Teresa was receiving an honorary doctorate at Harvard. If she had gotten it from Columbia, my alma mater, I wouldn't have been quite so annoyed. But I said, making Mother Teresa an honorary doctor is like making Jesus a Monsignor. It's ridiculous. So I was annoyed, and I told the sister she shouldn't go, but she wanted to go. And a friend of mine was there. The place was mobbed, the Harvard graduation. And they all heard Mother Teresa was coming. Wasn't an inch of room. And she got up in her flat staccato voice, and she spoke for 20 minutes on the beauties of virginity and chastity. They sold dictionaries in Harvard Yard that afternoon because people who knew 50,000 English words didn't know what one of those meant. How do you spell it? C-H-A-S-T-I-T-Y. They didn't know what it was. As Mother was speaking, there was absolute silence. And when she got finished, there was absolute silence. And then there was thunderous applause for 4 minutes. Sometime later, I met the chaplain of Harvard University, the campus minister, who it turns out, the Protestant chaplain, who was responsible for Mother Teresa getting the degree. And I said, why in the world did they react that way? A lot of these people, probably most of them, did not agree what she was saying. Some of them didn't even understand what she was saying. And he gave me a marvelous answer. He said, because she was different. different. We say that word in different syllables in Mass. Holy, holy, holy. Different means transcendent, and holy means transcendent. This group of people were touched by the different. And when I was at Columbia, one of my fellow students was a religious sister. Those were the days when sisters went into secular clothes. And stupidly, she took a course called Human Sexuality, which was dumb. And the professor, who was stupid too, had set up this thing. They were all going to tell the most lurid sexual experience they had. Mm-hmm. Much of this was fiction. You know, they were all trying to outshock each other. And they got the sister who they did not know was a nun.
She was not dressed as
no. And she really shocked them. They ran for the door, threw open the windows. She said, I've never had a sexual experience. I'm a Catholic sister. The reaction was unanimous. Don't move. Don't get involved. Stay right where you are. Every last one of the students, I asked her this myself, every one of them said the same thing. To quote Wordsworth, she was our tainted nature's solitary boast, which Wordsworth, the English Protestant poet, said of the Immaculate Conception. Our tainted nature's solitary boast. They were caught off guard. If you gave them a lecture on chastity, except from somebody like Mother Teresa, they wouldn't have accepted it.
Well, Father, something similar in a very modest basis took place when I gave a talk in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And you know, there are two ways of approaching people. One of them is to be on their level, to speak their language, use their terminology, and so on and so on. The other one is to appeal to what you know is in them, but they don't even know it. So my talk was about purity, and you know, I tried my very best to show the luminous, incredible beauty of this virtue, you know, as found in the Holy Virgin. And there was a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, was taping it on television. And the talk was well received, and as I was leaving, she ran after me, and she said, you know, I'm just working here, but I heard what you said. I never heard anything so beautiful in my life. It was, you know, and I just said to myself, this is a mystery of all that I was saying is to show the beauty of it. And this is what is not done in education. And this is why little girls at the age of 12 or 13 already have lost sense for the dignity and mystery of their being.
I think probably, Doctor, it would be helpful if we spoke a little bit for our audience about the meaning of chastity. Because people in a legitimate marriage, exchanging their affection with each other with a dignity and respect for each other and for what they are doing, are being chaste. That is a form of chastity.
Of course.
Pope Pius XI, when he wrote his encyclical on marriage, called the chaste marriage. Mm. And people mistake that idea for celibacy or simply being single. A person may be single out of fear of other people, or they may be single for a variety of reasons that aren't particularly spiritual. But we should talk a little about, what do you mean by chastity?
Father, I do believe, once again, you will excuse me if I quote my husband, it is a trembling reverence in front of a mystery.
Trembling reverence in front of a mystery.
You know, many people are going to say the key virtue is prudence. In several of his works, my husband says, the key virtue is reverence. Father, you've heard thousands and thousands of confessions. May I ask you an indiscreet question? Has anyone ever accused himself in confession of being irreverent?
Rarely, but it does happen.
When
And surprisingly, it happens when you hear the confessions of priests. They are aware that they rushed Mass or that they didn't do something, and they're repentant about that.
No, you see, it seems to me, and once again, the blessing of a Catholic education, probably through the extraordinary purity that my father expressed in his beautiful eyesight, that was something so luminous and so transparent. I knew from the moment I was a little girl that there was something very mysterious about this. In the meantime, I've done a lot of thinking about it, because probably the question of feminism and purity are the talks that I give most often in the United States and in Europe and South America. You know, take for example the word procreation. I've been meditating on it. And it occurred to me, it's so obvious, you know, that you're going to laugh at me and say, my goodness, you've taken a long time to grasp it. But because when you say creation, what do you mean?
The work of God.
That's it. Procreation. No, in other words, that you collaborate with creation.
Yes.
Let us look at it from a biological point of view. What does the husband contribute? God has placed a living seed in his body. He has placed eggs in the female body. The very modest function of parents is to give a chance for the seed to fecundate this egg. One is material, the other one is material. The very moment that the egg has been fecundated in the woman's body, what happens?
You have a life.
God creates
Yes.
a soul. Creates a soul. Neither father nor mother contribute to the soul. Nothing. Because it's a totally new creation. And Father, once again, to indicate the dignity of the female body, I'm going to use a very simple language. God touches the female body and puts a soul in her body. The husband is out of the question. No, today, the great sickness of our society is to refuse to have children. You want to have fun, but you don't have to have children. Further, I thought about this. If you truly take it seriously, it means to say that you eliminate the word create, because you prevent a new child from coming into existence, therefore the creation of a new soul. But in this very moment, you cannot speak about procreation. You copulate. It's copulation. It's not procreation. The very moment that you purposely eliminate the possibility of a new life, you eliminate God. The moment that you eliminate God, you fall below the level of animals, because animals want to have young. They don't do anything against it. So, I mean, once again, you see the extraordinary dignity of the female body. You know, I just love the thought that the moment that a woman has conceived, God touches her body. And once again, it must give a feeling of such overwhelming awe, because it is a work of God.
Now I'm going to give you a tough one. We didn't rehearse this, by the way. You probably figured that out. I worked all my life with the poor, the very poor, by choice. And I've had a wonderful time. Working with the poor is a wonderful experience. Don't ever feel sorry for those who work with the very poor. And among the very poor, you find people who came into existence almost by accident. And a young man, a very, very fine young man, who I helped to raise, he was conceived in a home, in an institution for the developmentally disabled, for the retarded. No one knows how his mother got pregnant, but she could not release him for adoption because she wasn't legally competent. So he went from foster home, and basically he was raised by the church in the foundling. And he didn't get into very many foster homes. He was mostly in Catholic orphanages. And he came to us as he was 17. And he said to me one day, he knew this. He came and he was very dejected. And he said, you know, I'm an accident. I shouldn't exist. And I said to him, you know, nobody's an accident. Human beings gave you your body, but God gave you your soul. And he's such a fine man now. I still think of him as a youngster because a young teenager, because I took care of him, an older teenager. He now takes care of his mother, has an excellent job, a very responsible government job, and he takes care of his mother, who is no longer institutionalized, with the greatest kindness and affection. And he contributes regularly to our work with homeless girls. He has an immortal soul.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful soul. So even when things don't work the right way, divine providence gave us families. He didn't have a family, but he has an immortal soul.
You know, Father, what you say is so uplifting and is going to give hope and confidence to millions of people who feel they should not have existed because they were the fruit of rape or an accidental relationship or whatever it might be. Of course, it's beautiful to say, as my husband did say to me many times, I'm the fruit of a great love. It's not always the case, but God always wins because he is love.
God is love. And so if people are watching us who did not come from well-organized or healthy family situations, don't feel that you are left out. God knows it would have been better for you if you did, but you still have God as your Father. Years ago, unfortunately, we had capital punishment. And in New York, this was done in Sing Sing prison. And I knew the priest when I was a young seminarian who was the chaplain of Sing Sing. And the man was there who was condemned to death in the electric chair. And when anyone was going to die, Father stayed in the prison all day at their call, talked to them, was available to them. And this man had had a horrible life. His face was deeply scarred and he was blind in one eye because as a child, his father threw a bottle of muriatic acid at him, acid that's used to clean bricks. And so he was condemned to death. What a horrible existence. And Father asked him if he wanted to go to confession. He said, look, Father, you're a nice guy. You've been nice to me. If it makes you feel better, I'm going to go to confession. But I don't believe in God. There is no God. God could not exist and allow this to happen. And the cloistered nuns, the Blessed Sacrament sisters, prayed for him during the night. They stayed right up until executions were at 11:45. And he went into the execution chamber. Father stood in the back. Awful experience. And Father wanted to be with him. And Father Donovan was his name. And the warden said, do you have any last words? Before they put the bit in his mouth. And he shouted out, God, have mercy on my soul.
How beautiful.
Father gave him absolution, and he died.
How beautiful.
So we talk about what should be. The good family should be. You came from a good family. I came from a good family. Loving parents, people who tried their best. But even those who do not have this, God watches out for them. I feel so sorry for many young kids growing up today who really do not know what true human love is. It's a loveless world.
Well,
And they're not taught anything about love. And the wretched media, which represents the low point of any culture, they don't teach anything about true love either. They did years ago in good movies about love in the 40s and 50s. The movies were about true human love, but now it's not. It's about exploitation.
I happen to know 3 people who play a role in my life. And all 3 told me, my mother never said to me, I love you. You see, Father, the moment a mother ceases to be motherly, the sun is setting on a society.
Yes. Yes. And unfortunately, in a society where abortion is widespread and accepted legally, that message that you're expendable is always there. Every child who lives in this country now knows they could have been aborted. This is why Mother Teresa used to say that no nation can survive that kills its own children. Please join us for our next segment. This is a kind of somber note to end on. But we're going to come back with, I know where Doctor is going, to some very beautiful things about human love. God bless you, and thanks for listening.